So, the best man for the job is a woman. I've actually heard that said quite often, normally by a woman trying to make the point that any role should not be specifically for a man, or indeed for a woman. I've heard it so many times, yet we still assume that some roles are male and some roles are female. Recently I was talking to a friend about a customer of mine, and I referred to my customer as the vicar's husband. My friend's reaction to that was, I thought, quite interesting. He said, "Oh, I didn't know the vicar was gay." It was easier for them to assume that the vicar is a gay man than that they're a woman. Now, given that we have had female clergy in the Church of England since 1994, 25 years, over 25 years, I mean, it's astounding that we still have that attitude. Another friend of mine is a female plumber and heating engineer. And very often she'll turn up to work to be greeted by the customer saying, "Oh, when's the man going to get here?" Because there's an assumption that a tradesperson is a tradesman. We even do it in our language. That plumbers, electricians, decorators, gardeners like me are going to be men. But there's no reason why they shouldn't be women. And more women are taking on these roles. There's nothing that a woman can't do that a man can do simply because they're a woman. Conversely, more and more men are beginning to take on roles that we traditionally think of as being female. Another customer of mine was talking to me recently and said, "Oh, by the way, just so you know, the cleaners are coming to sort the house out this afternoon." Fine. And I felt really surprised when 3 men turned up to clean his house. I had to challenge myself. Why was I surprised? Men can clean. They don't often, but they can. And I thought, well, I suppose it's a combination of upbringing and experience. I'm old. I was brought up in the 60s and 70s. And in those days, women cared and cleaned. Men made and fixed things. And that was it. But we've moved on from there. We've progressed. And we now increasingly begin to accept, though we've still got a way to go, we're beginning to accept that maybe the best man for the job is a woman. But what about if that woman's black, has a disability, or like me, transgender? It's even harder. Now, most of us, when we talk about inclusion, what we actually mean is, please include people like me. Women want to be treated equitably with men. Did you know that there are more CEOs of FTSE 100 companies called Dave than there are women? BAME people want to be treated with equal respect to white people. I've got a friend who is a director of an international bank. But until recently, even in his own office building, he was mistaken for a security guard. People with disabilities want equal access to places, services, as able-bodied people. We all want to be treated the same. But even now, middle class, middle-aged, white, heterosexual men, it's not personal, even though they're a minority of a minority of a minority, still rule the world. Most companies, most organisations now have a policy on inclusion. They will call it their inclusion policy. And they'll have procedures on how to get that policy fulfilled. Try and get equal pay. Yet, we still see managers, company owners, hiring people that look like them. Maybe not literally, but whether it's background, whether it's the type of school you went to, or even the sport you played. I know I got at least one job because I was the only candidate who played rugby. I've mentioned that I'm transgender. I mentioned I'm a gardener. I mentioned that I used to play rugby. I often describe myself as the world's leading Christian transgender bass trombone and tuba playing gardener. Curiously, I've never been challenged on that. But yeah, I'm a musician as well. And I've noticed that a lot of the bands I play in or conduct and the orchestras I play in and the ones I go and see and listen to are usually predominantly white. They're also predominantly male and pale as it goes. And that worries me a little. Interestingly, it recently started to worry a lot of people running professional orchestras that they seem to be exclusively from one small section of the community. And they tried to work out what it was and how it was happening. And they found that candidates were roughly equally male and female. The people that they were inviting to audition were roughly equally male and female. It was at the audition stage that the women and the BAME people were failing. Does that mean that white men are better instrumentalists than anyone else? Some of these orchestras decided to do something quite radical. And they started to hold the auditions behind a curtain. So they couldn't see what the candidate looked like. They could just hear them play. So they didn't know which of the candidates they'd interviewed was playing. Strange thing happened. They started hiring a lot more BAME people, particularly in America. But they still weren't hiring women. It was only when they got the candidates to take their shoes off before walking into the room that they started to get an equal number of women. The people conducting the auditions heard them walk in. They could hear the heels. Subconsciously, they had told themselves, it's a woman. Now, I'm quite sure this was unconscious bias, because those august musicians conducting those auditions, they want to have the best instrumentalists in their orchestra that they can get. I'm quite sure of that, because that's what musicians do. We want excellence. But they had to shift their perception of what excellence meant. They had to put aside, consciously put aside their prejudice. Because it is prejudice. I mean, you know, it's a bit of a dirty word, but that's what it is. Now, I've been talking mostly about gender-based prejudice, because as a transgender woman, That's what I know about, because I've experienced it on both sides. I know how much more favourably I was treated as a man than as a woman. I only realised how much privilege I had when I transitioned. Believe me, nothing makes you understand privilege like giving it up. So what are we going to do about it? Well, is it time to step outside our comfort zone? Is it time to start saying, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to try and spend time with these people that I don't like, that make me uncomfortable? Because that's what stepping outside our comfort zone means, isn't it? Oh, no. No. We shouldn't be stepping outside our comfort zone. That means we're going to do something we fundamentally don't want to do. And you can't do that for long. Nobody wants to be uncomfortable permanently. You can do things you don't want to do. You can make yourself a bit uncomfortable for a while. Last year I gave up booze for Lent. That wasn't very comfortable. You can do things you don't want to do occasionally. Every year I fill in my tax return and pay the demand when it comes in. But you can't spend your whole life like that. So I'm suggesting that we don't step outside our comfort zone. We shift our perceptions. We change our assumptions. We make our comfort zone bigger. We don't just spend time at work, at play, in the pub, in our social clubs. We don't just spend time with people that we perceive as being like us. I say perceive as being like us because until we actually stop and talk to someone, how on earth do we actually know what they're like? You know, let's just say, well, I'm going to change my attitude. I'm going to change my assumptions. I'm going to shift my perceptions. I'm not going to make an effort. I'm just going to be nice. And I'll tell you what, that way we'll actually meet more people. We'll meet more interesting people. We can embrace people. Not literally. Well, actually, you know, if they're game, why not? But, you know, we might actually get some really interesting new experiences. We might get a new attitude to life. We might get a new perception of life. And we might make some really nice friends and meet some really nice people. Let's be nice. Thank you.